Ladies and gentlemen, I cover a lot of things in the world of chess on this channel, and one of those lot of things is Magnus Carlsen, of course. Best player in the world for the last 15 years, and you could argue the best chess player of all time. And he is still building upon his resume. At the moment, Magnus Carlsen is on a streak where if he joins a chess tournament, no matter the time control, just as long as it's in the traditional format, he wins. Every tournament he's played and finished in the traditional format, regular starting position, he has won since October 2023. In a previous video, I made a mistake. I said Norway Chess 2024. It was Norway Chess 2023 and Qatar Masters 2023. This man has won nearly 20 tournaments in a row. And today I'll be showing you the conclusion of the Tepe Sigmund tournament being held in Sweden. And on top of that, Magnus Carlsen played against the Prodigy Kid, the first ever game between Carlsen and Erdogmus. And that is what we are going to be looking at today. So we're going to kick things off with that game. Carlsen with the white pieces versus Erdogmus. Erdogmus is a greater shining and brighter shining star than Carlsen at the same age. Erdogmus is the strongest chess prodigy in the history of chess prodigies. Okay, he's 27, 20, he's number 14 in the world. Sorry, he's 14 years old, number 29 in the world, and he's born in 2011. Let that sink in. Carlsen is going to try to beat him, and Erigaisi is going to try to beat Woodward. And these are the two important matchups for the standing. So in this game, Carlsen opened d4, d5, knight f3. And his opponent, Erdogmus, played the Queen's Gambit, but with black. This is a very offbeat system. Normally, with black, you just mirror image. But this system is very forcing, and the idea is trying to get the opponent out of their comfort zone. Now, Carlsen has experience here playing this against Hikaru, and he plays c4, okay? And Hikaru recently has been playing the mirror image Queen's Gambit, which is very rare, but in the age of computers, basically you can play anything you want. Erdogmus takes the pawn on c4, and now it's basically like we entered a Queen's Gambit declined with knight f3 and c5. Okay, so Queen's Gambit accepted. So we have e4 takes. So for the brief moment, black is up 2 pawns, but white can play bishop c4 and also take on d4. Carlsen now does something which he calls anti-child chess, anti-kid chess, old man chess. What is the idea? We trade the queens. On the 5th move of the game, we take our young opponent into a queenless battle. We're going to play a chess game. We're going to have all of our pieces on the board, but we're not going to have any queens. 6 pawns each, bishop and knight. And this is going to play completely into Carlsen's strength. His strength is understanding positions with random imbalances like this. I mean, he has built a career on understanding chess with, like, what happens if there's just no queens on the board? How well can you maximize the impact of the bishops and the knights? The relative value of the pieces. They're not just 3-point pieces. That will change as the game progresses, and different ideas of the pawn structure. So right here, Magnus chooses to keep the knight in the middle and develop it. Meanwhile, develop his bishop. Erdogmus, meanwhile, capturing like this and playing very solid. And now Magnus chooses f3, which is a way to play for sure. He plays f3. The idea of this is that he doesn't have to castle his king, and since he doesn't have to castle his king, he will put the king on f2. It's better on the f2 square than on the g1 square in a queenless middle game, because as we approach the end game with less pieces, the king needs to be closer into the middle. f3 supports e4 and blunts this bishop. f3 also counters the knight developing to f6. So f3 is actually the best move. And here Erdogmus thinks he does his usual early opening thing for like half an hour and plays knight e7. He decides putting the knight on f6 is bad, and putting the knight on c6 where it fights for dark squares is better. He is correct. King f2, here, and rook c8. Rook c8 is the best move because when you move the knight, the rook will fight on the c file. Also, the bishop can go to c5, trade itself, and black is going to go here. But Erdogmus is still playing catch-up, as Magnus has, he plays first, so he gets to develop. He plays knight to d2, stabilizing the bishop. Now, if black moves the knight to e5 or a5, the bishop will have to be defended, but otherwise, it's not too scary. That is exactly what happens. The bishop goes to e2, and now Magnus will try to play f4, kicking out the knight and creating a pawn wedge, or playing rook c1. Every decision that white makes or does not make in this position will affect the color complex of the squares and the position, right? So you're targeting these pawns over here. That pawn is just straight up free, which is why bishop c5 is played. Everything that I have explained to you thus far is making sense. Oh, and by the way, since white kept his king in the center, guess who probably can also keep his king in the center? The young man from Turkey playing king e7 is probably the best move. Probably. So Magnus plays bishop c5. Why does he do this? He wants to attack the rook. He not really attack it, but target it, get his opponent to take, and we have rook c1, rook c1. Now this position is deceiving. There is still plenty of play here. So Magnus is going to play this rook, knight, and bishop endgame with rook, knight, and bishop against his opponent for hours. He's gonna grind the opponent down. Carlsen has made a career of playing pure endgames. This reminds me of chess from 100 years ago. I would not be surprised if Carlsen during this game thought about Jose Raul Capablanca or thought about, you know, his wife and baby. But also then he could also be thinking about Capablanca, because who doesn't just randomly daydream about Capablanca? Capablanca dominated chess in the early 20th century by simply playing positions like this. Positions that just look, well, the same pawns and rook, knight, bishop. I mean, it's just a draw, right? But not quite. So we have knight back to c6, and Carlsen plays e5. So voluntarily giving up the pawn, but then income would be rook c7. e5 is a fascinating move. The idea is quite simple. To land the rook on the 7th rank, it is so important to land the rook on the 7th rank in an endgame, because that is where you exert the most pressure, and black cannot defend himself because he would lose. So that's kind of the idea. Now, okay, shockingly, Erdogmus doesn't blunder that. We have f4, so Magnus commits like this, and then a3. Every pawn is going on a dark square. You're going on a dark square, so this bishop is completely useless. You're going on a dark square so that you can plant the knight on d6, establishing an outpost square in the opponent's position. That is covered in my next book, Chapter 3 on Peace Play. Can't wait for that to drop. And if you're looking for a signed copy in Canada or the UK or Europe, it is now actually in the description. The ones in the US sold out, unfortunately. Signed copies. For now, f6. Takes. Okay, so there's our transformation of the pawn structure. Erdogmus did not have to do this, but he transforms the structure, leaving us with 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3. But still the pawns are all on the same side. But maybe in the long run, this will prove to be something. Maybe Carlsen will turn this into a 2-on-1, and that's all he needs. But the position is still equal. Carlsen could just be bluffing. The rook goes up to c3, and now the rooks have to come off the board, and I really just don't know how Magnus expects to win this position. Bishop d3, h6. He forces the pawn forward. He's like, come here. Now, if the pawn had gone to f5, that would be a catastrophic weakening of the structure. Isn't that fascinating? Because when the king goes back, then the knight can establish control, and even g4 would be a problem, because this structure, this pawn will likely be lost. And if you don't take, if you go here, guess what? I'm going to go g5, and I already told you about this. Next thing we do is we're going to push all of our pawns, and we're going to overwhelm on that side of the board. It's all about exploiting the imbalances. Plus, look at this square. I'm going to go bishop b5, and trading this will lead to a completely winning endgame with dominant central control on the dark squares. So it's just very interesting how this completely innocuous position is actually really dangerous. Knight to f3, Magnus, there we go, expanding, h3 stable, everything is chill, knight to d2, and now can Magnus break through on this 2-on-2? Will his opponent at some point make a mistake? So knight to e5, bishop to f5, bishop to b7, and Magnus at some point is going to play the move knight to e4. There's simply no other way. He's going to look for an imbalance. There it is. And now a major moment. If Erdogmus takes, he removes yet another minor piece from the board and leaves just the knight and the bishop. If he doesn't take, if he plays, I don't know, bishop to h1, there is knight takes f6 here. That is a tactic, and then after g5, you would deflect the king away from the defense of the knight. So he needs to play a move like knight f7 maybe. But if he plays knight f7, the knight will continue to maneuver and maybe go over here. And Carlsen, as always, is causing second thoughts in the opponent's mind, and Erdogmus goes for this endgame, leaving him with a knight against a bishop. And the pawns are split, which means if the king ever makes it here, or one of these pawns finds a way to sneak through, the knight and the king for black are going to have to defend, and the white king is going to go over there. In an endgame, you need to play against two weaknesses. A weakness could be a weakness in your opponent's position, like these pawns, or a weakness could be a weak square and complex and area. So watch as Carlsen just continues to make little improvements. The pawns are all kind of slowly creeping forward. Knight to c8, he goes king e4, the king wants to go over there. King d4, hey, Erdogmus, you can take my bishop, but your king is so passive. Your king is so passive that despite us having the same amount of pawns, because you have no forward mobility, what's going to happen here is your king is going to run out of squares. So look, b5 takes, takes, the king is going to have to give way. And even if you play a5, I'm going to play h5, and the king is going to have to give way, and I'm going to go to the opposite direction, and I am going to win. Erdogmus does not blunder that, okay? He wasn't born yesterday, but he does commit to a pawn move. Maybe he didn't have to do that, but it's actually still okay. g5, and this is all we needed. There are only 3 pawns remaining and 1 freaking piece between this game being a draw or potentially being a win for Magnus. g6, g7, g8. Now, king d6 is on the board. That is the best move. Bishop to b7. Erdogmus needs to hold serve. He needs to bounce around his pieces in a way while monitoring this pawn and monitoring this invasion. Knight to g6, king to c4. He goes back to f8. The king is always threatening to go over there to b5 and a6. Knight e6 is a good blocking move, and now g6. And here black has to play knight to g7 and allow the infiltration here, or f4. The line after knight g7 goes knight g7, king b5, king c7 hitting the bishop, and the bishop moves, and the knight is able to return. And that is at least self-explanatory after g6, knight g7, king b5. But there might be some other lines here, you know, like here, and then bishop, you know, the bishop comes back, and then he has to play the correct way forward. Here, he needs to commit to the move f4, because this way, the king actually does make it. Why does the king make it? Because in this position, there is bishop d5. And if the black knight goes to e8, the king restarts its journey back. And there's a way here that you can get a Zugzwang. You basically get a position where at the right moment you play the move a5, like something like this, and then you play a5. And after pawn takes a5, you take with the pawn, and the king can walk over this way now. There is more mobility. There's a6. There's king a6 at the right moment. Black is just basically going to run out of moves at some point. He's not going to be able to defend everything, including this pawn. So Erdogmus is overwhelmed. Does he play f4? And he chooses wrong. He goes there, and that allows Magnus Carlsen in exactly the right timing to take on a7, and the bishop will stop promotion. And even though there's this amazing move b5, which is probably what Erdogmus was banking on, g7, you take it, I take, and now I'm gonna get back. And if you close me off, I go b6 and bishop here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the first ever battle between Magnus Carlsen and Yazcan Erdogmus in classical chess ended. A typical Magnus Carlsen, Jose Raul Capablanca style grind. He got this young man down to a position with 4 or 5 pieces each. And that is where he got the job done. And he is the greatest endgame player of all time. And he makes it count at the right moment. But will he win the tournament? He wins. But there is a man by the name of Arjun Erigaisi who has 4.5 points, half a point ahead of Magnus to start the day. If Erigaisi wins this game, Carlsen doesn't win the first tournament in about 3 years. If Erigaisi loses, Carlsen is the champ. If Erigaisi draws, they play a tiebreak. Erigaisi, Woodward, the young man from Texas. I apologize, by the way. I think the P sounds are a little loud. But anyway, we have a Nimso Indian. Erigaisi plays g3 and bishop g2. And in this game, it was a very, very double-edged battle. Check this out. Arjun Erigaisi is truly the Joker of chess. This man walks around with grenades in his sports coat. There is no other player like Arjun Erigaisi. You need to just chill out a little bit on the last day. Nah, g4. Nah, h4. Take my pawn. I don't care. Take the pawn. It's a double pawn and you're wasting time anyway. g5, h5, knight d7, queen d3 attacking the knight. He plays b5 defending the knight. a4, bishop a6. What the? This is what chess looks like when you dream about it. When you dream about chess, the positions don't make any sense. This position makes total sense. Black is up a pawn, but the compensation for white is in the form of a kingside attack, the bishop pair, and a very open board. The thing is with the player with the black pieces here struggles to control anything. You know, you're very solid. You have this brick wall setup, but you can't really poke your head out because Erigaisi is on the other side, swinging around a wooden stick, and at the end is a metal ball with spikes attached to it. And he's doing it with both hands, by the way. Arjun Erigaisi is a video game character villain, okay? g5 is the move that he chooses, and truth be told, he doesn't handle the position the right way, and he kind of blows up the board. So we have knight e2, and then he plays queen to h3. I mean, this is, and for what it's worth, Andy Woodward is doing an amazing job. He's striking at the middle. He's playing knight to b3. The way you control a player that's trying to set the board on fire is take the matches out of their hand, right? Or the gasoline. And so here, if you remove the pieces, white cannot attack without pieces. White cannot attack with the king in the middle. And Andy Woodward, yeah, for all he does, it does an amazing job here, you know, of controlling the game and creating a counterattack. But he might have forgotten who his opponent is. Because just when you think you have Arjun Erigaisi cornered, folks, this really might be the craziest game of chess you have ever seen. Arjun Erigaisi's like, oh, he's going to attack me? Okay, king f3. Bro, this man just played king f3. He played king f3. What are we even looking at? This is mind-blowing. Now, Woodward does what any normal person would do. He uses his f-pawn because there's a rook on the other side. f5. Erigaisi takes en passant, and after rook takes f6, bro, this dude went king to g4. There is a king further advanced on the board than any of his other pieces, and the queen and both rooks are still on the board, and that was the best move according to the computer. Had you gone this way, you would be subjected to the attack. Somehow on g4, none of these pieces can get to you. By the time they try, you will attack the knight, and you will create enough counterplay that it won't even matter. Folks, if a player played like this against me, I think I'd slap them. I'm not saying I would slap Arjun Erigaisi. By the way, e5 is fantastic. And if you take, you allow a knight check, which is apparently still fine. Arjun tries to lock up the center, but that allows Woodward to bring back his knight into the middle of the board. Erigaisi's king, meanwhile, is straight up doing the Ali shuffle. This man goes king g3 and king h2, and now nobody can get to the king. What are we witnessing? What is this? This is chess from another planet, okay? Meanwhile, remember, Erigaisi still needs to win this game, and Woodward goes wrong. Woodward goes wrong here, allows Arjun to create a borderline level of stability and actually some counterplay. Knight to d4, Erigaisi takes on c5. He's almost mating his opponent with rook to c8, but Woodward is coming back with the rook, holding the position. Erigaisi goes queen c3, both guys in a little bit of a time trouble here. Woodward obviously in a much worse shape. He gets one more chance a little bit later here. Erigaisi here after king h3. I think the best move for black was g5. Woodward needs to work on his pawn play in queen endgames. I'm not his coach, but 2 times in a row now, Erdogmus game and this one, with queen and pawns together, the move g5 apparently was the move, because it sneaks a pawn past, and if you take it, there's queen h6 check and queen takes g6. But okay, he's down on time, and we make it to the 40th move here. He actually went for it. I apologize. He actually went for it. I completely forgot about this. Completely forgot. He got another chance because I completely forgot Erigaisi blundered this. He needed to go to h1, and he goes here, and yeah, Woodward gets his chance, takes, and now is winning. Why is he winning? He has h and a pawns in an endgame. So Woodward is now beating Erigaisi. He sacrifices the queen there. It's kind of a cool move. And we have this. So we have the h-pawn promoting and the a-pawn promoting. White has to stop both of them. Black can't really get too active because the d-pawn is promoting, so he needs to keep some defense in the center of the board. Woodward has to win this game. And Woodward is going to begin the process of winning this game. Erigaisi's king runs to that side of the board to win this pawn. Woodward has this pawn, this king, and this knight, and he can try to win this bishop, by forcing it into the corner. King a6. And the winning plan here for black is to play king to d6, king a5, king c5. You need the king on c5. You cannot allow this king back into the game. King a6, king a5, there's knight e2, king a4, there's knight g1. This is the winning idea. Knight to g1, not knight to f4. Knight to f4 allows bishop f3, and then you don't actually block the pawn ever. You need to play knight g1, because after that, king b3, h3, bishop h1, you come back with the knight, and then you win. You have to put the king on c5. Andy Woodward doesn't do that, and after this sequence of moves, he cannot put his king on c5, which means that he needs to activate his knight, which means the white king is closer, which means that at the end of the day, even though it looks like he is completely winning, this bishop, after knight g3, bishop f3, h2, is actually saving the game like this. The knight is trapped. You allowed the king to get back too fast, and that saves the day. Andy Woodward could have won this game and played the tournament of his career. Well, Challengers was really good, but he had a great event. Oh, I forgot he lost to Jujiner. I was going to say he had a great event only losing to Magnus, but he lost to Jujiner, and yeah, okay. That's tough. He would have ended on a great note, though, with a win with Black against 2750. So he has work to do. The other two games ended in draws. Really not too much happened. Of course, Nojabek is always one of the most inventive players against Jordan, but they traded all the pieces by the 20th move. Grandelius Jujiner was an English. It was an interesting game. White was putting pressure, but it was an endgame. And ultimately, I want to focus on the players that are putting on the show. And that's, we get 3 more Carlsen and Erigaisi games. I think in the World Blitz Championship in 2025 in December, Erigaisi actually defeated Magnus. I could be making that up. Don't fact check me. But Magnus went on to win the tournament. But Erigaisi is always challenging Magnus in this Blitz format. Yeah, the playoffs in this event are Blitz games. So they both end the tournament with 5 out of 7. Arjun almost lost it there at the very end, putting on one of the craziest games I've ever seen. Magnus now will try to win the Blitz playoff. We have an IMSO Indian. We have G3, which is, by the way, the exact same line that Erigaisi chose here in the game against Woodward. This was a little bit after that game, maybe 3-4 hours. Obviously came prepared with something, and we're just going to see, is this man going to play G4 and H4 in these games? We get a normal positional battle. We have B6 from Carlsen, and he knows that he needs to limit the attacking opportunities of his opponent, and Erigaisi plays very normal. There's ideas of knight G5 and ideas of H5 and H6, which is why Carlsen goes here, simultaneously stopping that advancement and anything coming to G5. Erigaisi, I mean, he's a very, very experienced player at this point. But if he doesn't get his style of attacking game, it plays into Carlsen's hands, right? Rook C8 threatens the queen. Queen goes here. Knight F6, trying to transfer the knight into the middle of the board. The rook just leaves the danger. Erigaisi still kind of looking always for something uncompromising. He's ready to open up the middle of the board. There it is. Bishop F5, and the position becomes incredibly dynamic and sharp, even though Carlsen was trying to stop that. The knight on E4 is hanging. You can't take it back with black. So the knight has to go here, and now immediately Erigaisi is damaging the structure, right? So he transforms the pawn structure in a very dynamic way and chops down the pawn in the center of the board. Now, the way Carlsen will ultimately win this game with black is if he is able to keep one of those pawns versus one of these, versus clearing out those pawns. So the bishop will hold the pawn here, and maybe the rooks will end up overwhelming here with this bishop. Or white is just going to blunder something. Bishop E2, knight D2. Erigaisi has an advantage, and he's up on the clock. I mean, this man is incredible. So we have rook to D8, Carlsen going to an endgame, rook D8, knight to E4. You can't take the bishop, because then he's going to take the pawn on F6. F5, though, a very nice move, but knight to C3. Erigaisi is not going to fall for any tricks. This is just not looking possible to win. If you trade the bishops here, I'll establish a beautiful D5 outpost. So he goes bishop B7, rook to D1. Now Magnus, rook D4. There's endgame magic. I mean, magic and Magnus start with the same few letters, all right? Rook D4. Erigaisi's bringing his king. Magnus using his doubled F-pawn. The weakness of his position to break apart the structure. Rook D4, CD4 gives Magnus a pass pawn. The knight goes to B5. Magnus chops down, and now that D pawn's just going to walk. Bishop C5. Could Magnus actually pull this off? Will Erigaisi make a mistake here? Knight C7, king F7, knight A6, and Carlsen traps his knight on the outskirts of the board. And this exact diagram is why a bishop is better than a knight. Literally just this. The bishop doesn't allow the knight back into the game, and the pawn is hanging. Erigaisi, in his mind, is programmed to attack, but he needed to go bishop c4 check here and centralize the knight back into the board. But he goes here, and with one move loses the whole game. Even though it's not a tactical move, he ends up in a position where he can win back the pawn, and he's going to save the knight, but it's not enough. King g6, king e3, and that's it. He's going to take this pawn. The knight is stuck, completely dominated here, can't walk off the edge of the board. Magnus Carlsen wins with black. And of course, he's going to win the second game, right? He wins with black. He has a game with white. He's going to control the game. Erigaisi has to play something crazy. Erigaisi plays a Peer's defense. Carlsen plays the classical system. It's called the classical quiet system. I mean, you cannot invent a more fitting name to try to take your opponent out of any attacking possibilities. Erigaisi plays e6. I mean, this stuff is ugly, man. Oftentimes at high-level chess, you have to get a bad position before you get a good one. That's just the truth, especially with black, all right? Carlsen, A4, taking space on the queen side, not letting those pawns get active. And over the first 20 moves of this game, Erigaisi put everything on the third rank of his, the 6th rank overall, but his 3rd rank, and Carlsen built up an advantage that had the computer screaming. But here's the thing. When you set up something like this, you still have to be beaten. You can set up a brick wall like this, and white can have an advantage because white has more space and activity. But white still has to throw a punch. Technically, white doesn't. Technically, Carlsen can play king h1, king g1 for the rest of the game. But at some point, Erigaisi is going to do something, and there it is. He crosses the line with his kind of strange, provocative play. Carlsen continues to make improvements, but Arjun's like, yo, Magnus, I'm going to win your pawn. Magnus is like, you know what? Take my pawn. If you take the pawn, I'm going to infiltrate on the A file. Erigaisi is like, just kidding, I don't want your pawn. Magnus is like, dude, you threatened me on that side of the board, you better take my pawn. So we have takes, c5. Carlsen is now much better if he takes on c5 and plays bishop f4. He tries to lock the position, though. In chess, sometimes the best move is not the prettiest. This is not a pretty move, but this looks nice, defended by both pawns. Erigaisi immediately, capitalizing on the position, begins maneuvering his pieces and baiting Magnus into winning back the pawn. Magnus goes f4. Carlsen does not play moves like d5 and f4 unless he's destabilized. d5 and f4. f4 opens the floodgates. Magnus is basically like, the pawn over here doesn't matter. I'm going to launch an attack against this king. He has misevaluated this because after chop chop, knight back to d7, Erigaisi is going to take over the dark squares in the middle of the board. It looks like with white, you are breaking in on h6, d6, f7, and the king is weak. But Arjun Erigaisi invented dynamic chess. No, he didn't. But he's certainly revolutionizing it in the year 2026. Rook a2, Carlsen doesn't want that. Immediately knight e5. But this is not usual for Carlsen. d5 allowed control of e5, but there used to be a pawn there which Magnus played f4. I mean, Magnus is playing technically illogical moves, right? He's being thrown off here. Now the dark squared bishop is there. Carlsen gives up the dark squared bishop because he wants to attack. Erigaisi, cool, calm, and collected, gives a check and defends everything with knight to g8. Puts the knight back on the home square. There's no knight f6. There's no queen h6, queen h6. Carlsen at this point realizes, bro, I have 17 seconds and my position is butt cheeks. It's terrible. What on earth do? I have to sacrifice a pawn. I have to change something so that the opponent takes the pawn, but at least I have a passed d-pawn. I can maybe move my knight. I'm going to bring my knight into the middle of the board, but here comes Erigaisi with a fork. Carlsen sacrifices the knight and tries to drive the knight to e6, but Erigaisi takes it. He won a knight. He wins the second knight. He has total control. Black is completely and totally insulated here. There is no way in against the black king. There is no way in for white to do anything. The rooks are useless. The rooks are 5-point pieces, but this is a 5-point bishop. You can't tell me this bishop is not worth 5 points. It controls everything. Defends the king, hits white's king, defends the infiltration spots on the left side of the board. And ladies and gentlemen, Carlsen just resigns this position. He doesn't even want to play it because it's just a matter of time. Black is going to play queen f4, bishop e5. There's 2 ways to win a winning position. In this winning position for black, you can just maneuver your pieces and go infiltrate against the white king. You don't even have to trade the queens, but you can. Of course, you can just play queen d6 and win the endgame. Black is just going to win in the long run. Carlsen loses. Erigaisi wins the second blitz game, and we go to a third one. I don't know why in this game Erigaisi got white again, but now it's just sudden death. It's just a sudden death game. I think the players bid on time. I think they basically bid on who gets the black pieces and who starts with what time. I'm not exactly sure. Erigaisi, or maybe they bid for white. I'm not sure. I think that's what they did. They want to start with less time, but play with white and maybe draw odds though. I don't know. Because normally the draw odds mean that black starts with less time. Anyway, d4 knight f6. Erigaisi bid 30 seconds down to play with white. Carlsen defending the black side. We have a queen's gambit declined. Erigaisi once again is going to look to create something. 1-1, by the way. Winner takes all now. Knight h5. Carlsen trades off the bishops. Erigaisi plays rook e1, and he's going to play for f3 and e4. That is what you do in these structures. You move the knight back, you play for f3, and you're going to try to play for e3 to e4. Carlsen immediately shutting that down. Hits the center, looking to put this bishop back. If e4 on the board, c4 is going to be a problem always. Or you're going to chop in the middle. Bishop d7 was also possible. Erigaisi hits the queen and has his biggest advantage of the game here, but not after that move. He needed to play c4. He needed to keep these pawns defended. He needed the d4 pawn to be susceptible to attacks from b2 or from f2. And c4, he would have allowed this pressure, but at least he would have had opportunities to attack there. But now, watch as Carlsen swarms with his 4 pieces. Carlsen against Erdogmus only needed 2 pieces. 1 piece. Against Erigaisi, just this. I mean, the bishop hits the pawn. The knight goes back to e8 to then blockade the pawn on d6. After knight e5, Carlsen zips the queen to h4, hitting the pawn and the rook. The rook has to go here. Now, the bishop on d7 is hanging, so you should probably move it, right? Where it permanently hits a4. And last but not least, the final puzzle piece. The queen, the rook, the knight, and the bishop optimally positioned. Now what? Erigaisi goes queen b6. The knight is hanging, but there's bishop takes a4. And his idea, Carlsen, was that if rook a1, the bishop can just go back. It can just go back at any point. So the knight is hanging and the rook takes, but the queen goes to f4, because if you take the bishop, queen e3 and rook c1, Carlsen leaves 2 pieces hanging. This is brilliant work in a blitz game. Both of them are hanging. Neither of them can be taken because d4 is always hanging and this infiltration with the queen and the rook. h3 is the move chosen here from Erigaisi, bishop e8. And now with white, you have to accept that your position is not as good as you think it is, because the second you go here, check, king g1, rook c1, knight f5, they're all good. This one is worse than the others because here Erigaisi can play d6. He has to go d6. d6 forces a defensive move by black at least a little bit because there's always d7 on the board. But, I mean, here's the line. d6, queen e3 check, king to h2, rook c1, d7. And, you know, you just kind of like, you go for it. But here Erigaisi plays knight, rook back to a1, and this move is losing. Check, king h2, knight takes d4. And the reason this is losing is because after this, knight takes f3, hits the queen on b6. Arjun Erigaisi resigned, outmaneuvered, outplayed, outswerved by the prowess, okay, of the 20-time champion of the world, Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, this is the conclusion of the tournament. Carlsen wins the Tepe Sigmund in the last round. He takes down Erdogmus in a classical game, nearly had him in tears at the end, beats Erigaisi. Magnus Carlsen has won every tournament he has started and finished in a traditional chess format, not freestyle, which is almost like a lottery. And even there, he's the world champion. Carlsen has won every tournament that he's played in since October of 2023. I mean, I don't know what else you want me to say. So on that note, I told you about my book. If you want to go get a signed pre-order in the UK, Europe, and Canada, it's in the description. You want to take your chess to the next level, you can check out Chessly, my educational platform. You don't want to hear me talk anymore, that's also okay. Get out of here.